The first kiss is always sweeter when you flirt for a while first. Sometimes this is the way I feel about perfume brands. You hear a little bit about them from a friend. You notice them from across the room. They seem different from the others. The first encounter is a bit awkward. You're both a little shy. But slowly you get to know them and the familiarity grows and you start to learn the quirks of their personality. I really like this about discovering interesting perfume brands, how you get to know their style through repetition, through trying their fragrances. I had heard about Perfumer H for quite some time. I remember them making the blogs, particularly British blogs, since she is located in London. But I guess they hadn't really become that easy to find in the US yet. Maybe they've been around for a while and I only just noticed them, but they seem to be popping up more and more in kind of chic clothing boutiques around here. So it was maybe 2 months ago that I saw a little display of Perfumer H at La Garçon in New York City. And I think it's kind of funny the kind of boutique they're found in. They're very like aesthetically similar. I suppose you would say it's quiet luxury, although a lot of these existed before that kind of silly trend term came around. But it's like these very simple, minimal, but luxurious brands. Sometimes they look a little homemade, natural fibers, linen and flax, earth mother vibes. Like a lady who you swear she's had long gray hair her entire life. She works at an art gallery. She's very reserved yet distinguished and like impeccable taste. Those kind of boutiques tend to carry Perfumer H. There's another one called Neighbor. They all kind of carry the same few lines of clothing as well. Probably La Mer would be the best representative of this style. Anyway, I like this style. It's maybe a little reserved for my personality, but I came across them again at the boutique Stelle and again at the boutique Assembly. So they're making their way into New York City boutiques. Anyway, my first encounter with them, I wasn't very impressed. Every perfumista's dream, I came across a little display that was completely unattended in a corner of La Garçon. So I went wild and sprayed a bunch of them. And it was a very hot day. And as I walked outside, I kind of smelled them and kind of felt like, meh, they were kind of thin. I didn't quite get it. But there was enough there to intrigue me to explore further. So when I saw them at the boutique Stelle, I saw one called Dandelion, which I had not seen before. And I tried it and I really liked that. It's kind of everything I like in a summer scent, very green and stemmy, a little bit floral, bright. And in fact, that's the candle I'm burning right now, is Dandelion. So I decided to get this Icons Discovery set. It's a little more than a Discovery set in that they're more like travel size, about 9 milliliters. This brand is overall fairly expensive. They have kind of an interesting format in that you can really go big and spend a lot of money on a very beautiful hand-blown glass vessel, or you can buy a much more plain kind of black spray vial with a white label like this. But even those aren't cheap at all. And this little Discovery set wasn't particularly cheap, but again, it's more than just little samples. They're little kind of travel atomizers. Now, I read in their previous press releases that they had this concept of having the Icons collection, which kind of sticks around, and then rotating seasonal collections, where they may bring back and take out fragrances. I'm actually not sure if they've dropped this concept or if they continue with it, but looking at the Perfumer H website, they actually have a load of fragrances, a ton of fragrances in different collections and subcategories. But here it seems like most of the boutiques have the Icons and maybe one or two of the other ones outside of that collection. So anyway, we'll go through each. I've worn each of these at least once. I'll say getting to know them better, I've come to appreciate them a lot more. I think overall stylistically, they wear very soft. This can be the good and the bad side of this kind of artisanal feeling fragrance house. Obviously, Lynn Harris is a professional in the perfume world who has been around for quite a while and been involved in many projects. So she certainly is not like an artisanal indie amateur perfumer by no means. But it is a smaller house. and it has this very kind of handmade feel to it. I think the balance and the refinement really show her skill, and that it's not kind of like a gloopy indie typical mess, but they also have like a softness, maybe avoiding those particular extending aroma chemicals that we see in designer perfumes. But on the downside of that is they do lack a bit in the performance department. Now that's never the biggest deal to me, but I do find sometimes it's disappointing when fragrances just really sit on the skin and you never get that fragrant bubble. You just get kind of a nice smell when you go up to your skin. And I have a bit of an experience like that with these perfumes. So we'll start with Bergamot. Also for the price, I only wore this once, but it's the kind of thing where I kept wanting to spray more and I went back and reapplied. You can see how much from one wearing I used up. Another interesting thing is about the names. They're almost all just kind of one word descriptors, and they're quite intriguing in that it makes you think about how the fragrance itself relates to the name, because none of them are literal takes on the namesake. And of course, none of them are simply solely note, soliflores. The bergamot is definitely not just invoking pure bergamot. But I suppose the kind of maybe dissonance between the name and the smell gets you thinking. So here's Bergamot. Yeah, very bright. I'm noticing very peppery at the start. Nice, spicy, lemony. They list lemon, neroli from Tunisia, aldehydes, clove, frankincense, juniper wood, tonka. So yeah, very bright, almost sour, sharp kind of bergamot smell. I remember wearing this, and for a freshie, again, it lasted pretty nicely, especially on my shirt. I think none of these have issues with longevity. The issue, again, is just maybe with the wear. And it's not even necessarily an issue. I think it's clearly a stylistic choice. Again, that kind of aesthetic I described before is very quiet, very personal, maybe very introverted, and I feel that way about the way these wear. They're very much smells for you and almost no one else. At no point with any of these did I feel like I had, kind of a fragrant aura or bubble around me, but they did last quite nicely. What I like about this is kind of the neroli heart. I'm getting like a little bit of like a fresh white floralcy. I wouldn't necessarily have clocked clove as the spice, but there is definitely a spiciness to this. I think juniper is adding to that freshness. But yeah, it does remind a little bit of Le Labo Bergamot, just to get you in the ballpark, but that one is much more synthetic, much harsher, much louder, also much more long lasting. That one gets on my nerves a little bit. This one, after that opening really zesty start, kind of starts to calm down and smooth out. I also find the transitions really well done here. Although I said they were soft, it's not like they start with a burst and then they just fall apart. They have really smooth transitions and subtly kind of morph into the base, and suddenly you're left with something at the end that is sometimes quite different from what you had at the beginning. So actually along those lines, Rain Cloud, I expected to love, and again, that's why I made this allusion to intimacy and getting to know someone, because I feel like these really grew on me and I really learned more about them wearing them at home in an intimate setting. So I expected to quite like this because I like petrichor based scents. I like the smell after the rain. Kind of who doesn't? It seems like, people often talk about how they like that smell. I would be hard pressed to find someone who doesn't like that smell. And this also notes iris as being one of the main ingredients. Yeah, up front, it's actually quite sweet now, especially comparing it to the bergamot. It says a rain cloud of sultry white florals, ylang ylang, vetiver, angelica, which I often associate with that kind of wet after the rain smell, especially as used in Frederic Mall's French Lover. Iris absolute, and a bed of white musks and amber. So as I said with this one, I quite like the opening. It's actually very floral, a little bit sweet. It has that sort of same almost sour, tart zinginess that I mentioned in Bergamot. I didn't like the mid so much because it was kind of dominated by this vetiver I've smelled before in kind of small indie houses, that I think it's just a personal thing. It's just not my favorite smell, but that died away and later was left with more the iris and musks and vanilla. And to me, it had this really beautiful, like warm, waxy dry down. Ylang ylang often gives this kind of waxy, yellow, waxy petal kind of smell. And again, I was like intrigued by the opening, let down by the mid, and completely in love by the dry down. Most of these, because it is really hot and gross right now, I wore in the evening after a shower coming home and into the next day, and I could smell this really beautifully the next day on my skin when I woke up. So that's Rain Cloud. Next up, we've got Leather. Again, none of these are literal, so leather isn't all that leathery, but the name makes you kind of think about in what ways what you're smelling invokes leather. Yeah, so off the top, I do get a sense of kind of a suede leather, maybe smelling the inside of a suede handbag. It also begins with bergamot. It mentions lavender, birch tar, rose, once again, iris, cardamom, sandalwood, cedarwood. I would say I'm getting the cedarwood up front. There's definitely this kind of almost spa vibe, comforting woodiness to it. I don't think I would get lavender if I hadn't seen it, but again, there's a little bit of this like herbal touch in the beginning. Not leathery at all in the sense of, it mentions birch tar, but I don't get an overwhelming birch tar sensation. Nothing bitter or smoky about this. It's very smooth. Again, to me, comes off a bit like a floral leather. Really pretty, but again, also just really, really soft, really smooth. Onto ink. Apparently this is one of their best sellers or most popular. I expected something much weirder than this because I've smelled other ink inspired fragrances that really double down on that kind of iodine sensation that can be quite challenging. This again is not all that challenging. I don't think anywhere it claims to be an all natural house, but I will say these smell very, very natural. Again, whatever synthetics are used very in a very restrained manner, not to give any of these too much of a beastly performance or projection. Interesting. Yeah, again, it's really interesting smelling these side by side as we go. Ink again strikes me as having a really bright pepperiness to it. Something very spicy. Again, I feel like I can imagine the connection to ink. There is a little bit of that. Yeah, I guess it's iodine, but here it doesn't smell synthetic. It smells more like it's implied by elements of the natural notes. So they say it's a cerebral scent of blue ink on white paper. Papyrus, vetiver, cedar, elemi, hints of ambroxan, and isobutyl quinoline. Now that's really interesting. I've worn this and I hadn't read that before. Of course, we know that's the accord that was used for leather back in the day and can be quite powerful. It was used famously in Rosé Cuir more recently. I never would have gotten that, or necessarily the ambroxan, but it is giving a little bit of that lift. Yeah, I'm a little bit confused by this one, or at least by other people's experience of this one, because some people found it quite challenging and said it was really interesting, but in a way it's almost the most kind of designery. It's almost like a Cartier declaration, like a bright spices, like a Jean-Claude Elena, like bright spices floating around on this kind of airy, woody base. It's nice, but I don't think it's my favorite. And here we go, the last one, Smoke. This was my scent of last evening and into today. And again, I had a similar experience as I did with Rain Cloud. Somewhere along the mid, I wasn't quite feeling it. Again, it doesn't smell smoky in the sense of like a strong, obvious incense, but to me, this one's all about resins, particularly labdanum. And I got this labdanum mid in the middle that was not quite annoying me, but maybe just a little one note. But once again, more layers kind of peeled away and started to reveal themselves. And much later, and again into this morning, I was really loving what I smelled. So this lists coriander seed, angelica, rose, chamomile, frankincense, agarwood, santal, santal Mysore, it says, cedar, birch tar, and cade. So yeah, again, I think she likes these very sort of like fresh, spicy, herbal top notes. And I'm getting that in smoke. There's a little bit of like an underlying bitter resinousness to it that again can imply burning incense. There's nothing literally smoky. It's more like cold incense, smelling incense that haven't been burned. Because there's none of that sense of like a smoky bitterness here. Again, I found the dry down to have this really like nice, like almost chewy, resinous, comforting, beautiful texture to it. So I really like that one. Probably on the top of my, if I was to splurge on one of these bottles to buy list, is still Dandelion. That wasn't included in the icons, but that's mostly weather related because I think it would be nice to wear here in the end of summer. Number 2 would probably go to actually Smoke or Rain Cloud. But let's give a quick smell through each of these. Yeah, bergamot is still there, it's still bergamoting. It's become considerably lighter already. Rain Cloud, yeah, again, a lot of iris. It definitely does have a cool wetness to it, but yeah, a bit of iris, a bit of sweetness to it. Leather. Yeah, this one's very soft. I remember spraying and respraying this at a store and I really liked the opening, but kept wishing for more. So that feels nearly gone already, but I didn't spray a lot. I'll have to wear this on skin again. Ink. Yeah, I feel like you can really get a sense of style across all of these with those kind of fresh, almost wet, a little bit woody, herbaceous top notes, drying down to something a bit warmer. Yeah, Smoke I think distinguishes itself. It's giving me a little more of that frankincense vibe. So final thoughts. I think it's a really interesting line for someone who likes big, bold fragrances. You might not find these good at all. I do think the kinds of boutiques where I've seen these, where I've seen the line pop up is really well matched. I wonder if this line is not so much for real fragrance enthusiasts, but more for the shopper at those kind of stores. Someone who wears things like the Row or is still obsessed with Old Celine or Phoebe Philo. Someone who wears La Mer. I sense they might be a little quiet or a little simple for the average perfume head, but I enjoy them. I've really enjoyed them again as kind of personal evening scents. I find they're a little quiet to wear out, at least in the stink of New York City. They very easily get lost. But also if you wanted just some more interesting than the usual fare kind of personal daily scents, these could do really well. So I look forward to trying more. One that intrigues me just based on the name is Incense Water. And yeah, we'll see how it goes with Perfumer H. The candle also, an aside, burns really beautifully. Not the strongest thing in the world, but no smokiness, really nice, perfect burn, which is always appreciated. So those are my thoughts for now on Perfumer H.